everyone. Thank you so much for joining our panel today at the incredible Youth for Youth iSummit hosted by Lookup. We're so happy to have you all here joining us discussing these important issues. My name is Maddie Freeman, and I'm excited to be moderating this panel alongside inspiring youth activists Tyler, Seth, Skylar, and Olivia. Today, we're going to be discussing digital addiction and the toll that it's taken on youth mental health. Students feel inadequate as they're comparing themselves to their seemingly mundane life to highlight all the ways that they're comparing themselves to the other friends' highlight reels, and it's been impacting mental health in a heavy way. Others are falling prey to self-harm competitions or addictive algorithms. In this session, youth advocates will share their stories while discussing the virtues and demise of digital devices. We're going to hear stories that delve into issues from lack of sleep, online addiction, suicidal thoughts, and even relationship issues. We're also going to address the struggle of making choices on how we can develop healthy relationships with these devices. Before we begin, I would love to briefly introduce myself and tell you my personal background when it comes to these issues and how I've become involved in this. My name is Maddie Freeman. I attend the University of Colorado Boulder. I'm 20 years old, and I'm the creator of No Social Media in November. My campaign's focus is on mental health awareness and tech addiction. It's really important to educate students and youth on the ways that these apps are designed to manipulate us, and it's important to encourage them to take individual action to fight against these problems. So I'm very excited to introduce each of our panelists and begin discussing their various perspectives on these issues. Each of them will tell us a brief backstory on their relationships with social media and what brought them here today. And then we will dive into a discussion, and following that, we will have a Q&A for the audience to engage in. Now, I'd love to introduce Tyler and have him start in introducing himself.
Yeah, thanks, Maddie. My name is Tyler, and I have no, real professional experience with this. I was more just a kid that was a heavy social media user. I got on around 11, 12 years old. Got on Instagram, Snapchat, YouTube, all sorts of things, and used it a lot. Used it probably 10 hours a day, all throughout high school. It wasn't until I was around 14, 15 when I started noticing all sorts of, violent things on it. And, it wasn't all clumped together. It was sporadic. And, we all know memes, and there'd be times, I'd be in math class and people would be scrolling through memes, and all of a sudden there'd just be a weird, random, violent thing that I would see. And it was just really, really strange to me. And that was the first thing that really caught my eye with it. And later on through high school, probably junior year around 2017, I noticed everyone was on their phones. Everyone was glued to their screens. I would take videos with my own phone, and I would pan around the classroom, and there wasn't a single person besides me who was looking up at another person. Even the teachers were just fully engulfed. It wasn't until my senior year that I decided to get off of it more as just an experiment to see what it was like. And it was probably one of the best things I've ever done, one of the most eye-opening. Going into college, I had no social media. I started taking psychology and sociology classes, and I was really curious to see how that would tie into what I was noticing with myself and with all my friends. Through that, I found Tristan Harris, Center for Humane Technology, a bunch of other people, Jerron Lanier, Cal Newport, many, many others. And I started to kind of take it upon myself to connect the dots with what I was learning and what I was either experiencing firsthand or with my friends. Then I became a firefighter and EMT, and would run, 911 calls. And I have seen how bad these can get and the bad outcomes, a lot with suicide, being some of those common calls that will run on And just kind of have gone from there. I've gone almost 4 years now without it. And I'm sure with more questions later on, I can go more in depth with all of this. So that's my little background.
That's great. Thank you so much for sharing, Tyler. And I know Seth has a similar story and has also been off social media for a long period of time. So we'd love to introduce Seth and hear his story as well.
Hey everyone, I'm Seth Bunev, and my story is that similar to Tyler in high school, I was troubled by how I was seeing these things affecting me and my peers in terms of sleep, in terms of mental health, depression, suicide attempts, like all of these kinds of things. And at the end of high school, I decided I would, in this case, not just go off social media, but completely remove all digital technology from my life. No computer, no email. I didn't even use phones like to call for about 4 years, and kind of was watching how my mind changed in that process and learned a ton from that, and really enjoyed it, although I was living in this world where I was present in physical reality and most people around me weren't a lot of the time. But there were exceptions to that, which was probably how it was able to continue. And then when I returned to like using digital technology, not so much social media, but to go to university, I had to use the internet, obviously. I tried to really figure out how I could use these things without being manipulated by them, use them on my own terms, get what I want out of them, not become back into these addictive patterns. And as I was doing that, and I started researching it from different angles, from historical angles, from economic angles, from psychological angles, I sort of had this project coalesce, which turned into a book called Screen Fairs, which is basically for teachers and parents. And it's looking at how can we teach young people, kids, youth, immunity to these kind of manipulative design techniques, and teach them how to see how their minds are being shaped by these technologies. And if they're going to use them on their own terms, just like I was trying to do, use them the way that they want to, and then also protect themselves from some of the negative effects. So that's a bit about my background.
That's great, Seth. Thank you so much for sharing. Awesome. And then lastly, we're going to transition over to Skylar for her story and introduction.
Hi, I'm Skylar. I'm 15, and I'm a sophomore at Alhambra High School. And I kind of, being in high school, everyone is on social media. That's how we communicate. That's how we kind of live our lives, is by talking to people online, especially with COVID. And when I was in 8th grade, I got to go to a Digital for Good conference, which was basically a bunch of teenagers showing how they made an impact on social media with a nonprofit that they created. And that was hosted by an organization called #ICanHelp, which is students empowering each other by using social media for good and making curriculum that goes along with that. And I really just kind of wanted to be a part of that. I wanted to help turn social media into this positive place, because there is so much negativity on social media. And so now, 2 years later, I am a content creation specialist, and I write blogs mainly and host Instagram lives, kind of just showing people that there is positivity on social media and how to kind of help your mental health with social media and ways to turn it into more of a positive experience for people.
That's an awesome story. Thank you so much for sharing. Great. And then lastly, we're going to turn it over to Olivia to also introduce herself and give a brief introduction.
Hi, everyone. Sorry I am so late. I had a lot of technical issues trying to get into the Zoom, ironically. So I am a recent college graduate. I went to Colorado College, where I studied psychology and wrote my whole thesis on the benefits and the harms that technology can have on young people when it comes to overusing and misusing technology. I also spent a little over a year doing research for a nonprofit called Live More, Screen Less that's dedicated towards digital well-being. And within this, I focused a lot on mental health and cognitive health, and how it really impacts our brain and our social relationships as well. But I also did some research into the physical effects that technology can have and addiction that comes with screens. And throughout all of that, I have changed my own relationship with technology and found that that's made huge differences in my life.
Great, thank you, Olivia. I appreciate you for sharing. It's so interesting to hear all these diverse yet similar perspectives on these issues. I feel that we all have a similar tie to mental health, and we're all interested in the ways that these platforms can kind of change our worlds and the ways that our brains function. So it's really interesting to hear that. So to get a deeper understanding of these issues and all of your personal links to them, sorry, I would love to start off by asking a few questions and leading a discussion. So feel free for all of our panelists to hop in whenever you feel that you have something to add. So my first question is, for all of you, what alerted you in the first place to these issues of social media? What was the first thing that drove you to want to change your relationship with these apps or even just become more aware about it?
For me personally, I kind of just saw around me that so many of the issues that we were having were caused by social media. And, for an example, just like last week at my school, all of our bathroom sinks got ripped out, our bathroom stall doors got taken down, things were getting stolen. And the purpose of that was to post it on social media. And people find that, bringing others down online kind of is what they choose to do. They choose to bring others down. And that's kind of, by their own insecurity. But I really just found that those things happening, so much that's happening wouldn't happen if we didn't have social media. I don't really know how to explain that, but kind of just if people were a little more positive and uplifting online, it would really just change our entire world. And I think really for teenagers, if they were able to see more positivity, then a lot of these mental health issues that we're having could be a little better.
Definitely. Does anyone have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I'll say real quick, like I said, it was the weird, sporadic little violent things that I would see. That was the first thing that caught my attention. I remember when I was, 13, 14 years old, I forget when it came out, but it's called the Reddit 50/50 challenge. And I was watching it on YouTube, and it was, a content creator who has a large kid audience. And I mean, I won't go into detail of what it was, but there's a lot of bad stuff on the internet, and it was just open to be seen, no matter how young I was. And it was not just open, but it was also, trending and like socially acceptable, and it just didn't seem right. So that was the first thing that caught my eye.
Yeah, thank you for sharing. Yeah, I'd love to hear if one more person has a specific story or initial thing that alerted them to these issues.
Yeah, I can. I think part of it started when I started doing school online. When I was around 13, I spent a year doing school online. And my thought going into it was, I'll be able to just speed through all the coursework and then I'll be done. I could even finish other grades in advance or whatever, and I'll just get to do whatever I want after that. And the reality was that I ended up just totally procrastinating. Like, I think I did a quarter of my coursework in literally the last 24 hours that I had, which the fact that I was able to get away with that just tells you something about the rigor of those classes. But and I don't even know what I did with so much of that time. I think I watched a lot of YouTube videos and like TV shows online, but the time just went away. But I also didn't leave my house. I ended up really depressed. I left my house once a week sometimes. And then compared to that, being in a normal high school, even surrounded by all these like people with mental health issues who are addicted to their phones, was such an incredible improvement. And then I guess the next thing was just seeing my incapacity to do things compared to people, stories I've heard of times before this wide prevalence of social media and internet technology. Just realizing that, you know, people before used to be able to take the bus without Google Maps helping them, you know, used to be able to make eye contact in a healthy way. I one day realized I didn't know how to make eye contact properly, but then I tried and other people around me weren't either. So it was hard to learn anything like that. So those were some of the things that clued me into the issues.
Definitely. Thank you for sharing. Yeah. So kind of going off of the issues that we've noticed, we're going to talk later about the good side of social media. But for now, I'm curious. I know a lot of you have backgrounds in psychology or are studying psychology, but just in general, what ties have you seen in your personal lives to mental health and social media? Because this is also something that I'm very passionate about and have definitely experienced in my life firsthand, is seeing the ways that it can be correlated. So I'm curious what you all of your perspectives are on that.
I think that, especially being a teenage girl, going on to things like Instagram and Snapchat, I would be instantly comparing myself, and it really just caused a lot of insecurity and body image issues, because you're seeing this highlight reel, but it kind of takes some time to realize that that's just a highlight reel. And I think my mental health kind of got better once I really got that in my brain, that this is a person's highlight reel. This is the best that, you know, they're going through, and kind of realizing that, I was like, this probably is not what they look like on an everyday. And that really helped me. But then I would go on like Snapchat and I would see people that I thought were my friends hanging out or having a party, and then I wasn't there. And it really just, you know, would make me really depressed seeing that. And so I think that social media definitely in those aspects has a negative effect when you're seeing just these highlight reels of people.
100%. I've seen that impact as well. I'd love to hear anyone else's perspective on this as well.
Yeah, kind of jumping off of what you were just saying, Skylar, particularly hitting on FOMO, and how much anxiety and depression that can cause, and keeping us tied to our phones can be, that's such like, it's such a hindrance on my mental health particularly, and I know that applies to a lot of other people, where I see people are hanging out and I see, you know, that like, oh, every so often, like I'll get a notification, or like someone will message me, and I'll like that hits me with that such a dopamine high, and then I want that to keep happening. And so, you know, I check my phone unnecessarily every, you know, 5 or 10 minutes, sometimes, you know, every 30 seconds. And that like distracts me from all of the personal relationships that are happening even right in front of me. Like I could be having a conversation with someone and I'll be like, oh, did my phone just buzz? And like it'll totally take me out. And it's so hard then to feel connected with everyone around you. And then also when feeling, you know, disconnected in general, or how Seth was talking about when he, you know, was doing online school. COVID obviously affected all of us in major ways with education. And with that, all of my social connections came online. And so I found myself just laying in bed, scrolling through social media feeds, and TikTok especially, and just feeling unable to break out of it and go outside. And that was huge on my mental health.
I can imagine. I appreciate your open, honest feedback on that. Yeah, so if anyone else has anything to add in on that, I would love to hear it. But also kind of going back to that psychology link, I'm curious if anyone's done any specific research or really looked into the ways that your psychology is kind of used against you when these app designers designed social media. I'm curious if anyone has anything on that.
This is kind of what my book is about, at least half of it. And I think what I could say briefly is that what they've done and in sort of the big picture is everything that is something that humans crave or desire or are made happy by, is, if possible, if it is within the technical possibilities, has been incorporated into some website or online platform or social media. And because of how it's set up, like these things are selecting for whatever does that the best. It's an evolution. It doesn't even have to be entirely designed. And yeah, I think part of what's happening is that there are all of these needs that we have that we are being given kind of artificial replacements for, and it can make it hard to realize that you're not having your need met. And I think I've even noticed this in myself lately, because I've had to use computers more for the work I'm trying to do combating this issue. If I'm feeling miserable about something or disheartened, it's so easy to get sucked into doing something online that feels like I'm actually doing something, but it totally is useless. Like looking up how to do something in 5 different ways and then looking up more ways of doing it and not ever doing it. And so I feel like that's part of what's happening is we can reach out because we need social interaction or because we need validation or information or whatever, and sometimes just fill that with something that doesn't really satisfy.
Definitely. Yeah, thank you for that. Well, if anyone else has anything else to add in, I would love to hear. But if not, I will be transitioning kind of into the next topic. So I'm curious, I know Seth and Tyler have taken long breaks off social media or completely ending their relationship with social media. I'm also curious if anyone else has ever attempted a detox or spent mindful time off social media. But my question is what your experiences were like before, during, and after taking that leap to log off of social media.
Yeah, well, I'll say to start before, I feel like it was the same. I was the same as everyone else who is in it right now. I was using it the same. I was using it, 10 hours a day. I remember there would be Sundays on a rainy Sunday where I would just go through Instagram all day and just switch between Instagram, Snapchat, like every 40 seconds to a minute, go to YouTube, binge watch YouTube, go back to Instagram, go back to Snapchat. And it just drains you. You don't feel like you've done anything. And it can be depressing and lonely when you spend that much time just doing nothing, basically. I will say that getting off of it, I highly recommend. I really do feel like there's this matrix that I've woken up from. And I don't know anyone else, in my circle with my friends who have taken, a month off from it ever. And I remember after, 8-10 months of being off of it, it's literally a whole new world. It's everything that you experience just day to day is so much more potent and visceral, and you have so much more connection to everything. I think it's the constant break of attention that you get from notifications, or even if your phone's not buzzing, just having your mind thinking of like, oh, I wonder who's liking my photo, or I wonder who's seeing my Snapchat story. And that can take you out of an experience. And it's all happening internally, so no one knows. And just completely disconnecting from it. I have no ties to the online world. And so just going through my every, day-to-day life, everything's my own, and it's super awesome, and it's great. So yeah, I recommend.
That's really good to hear. Yeah, Seth and anyone else, I would love to hear your input on that as well.
Sure. So you said before, during, and after. Okay. So I guess I told you a bit about before. During, I was very fortunate to spend the first year that I was offline in a school that specifically took digital stuff out of the social sphere. Like people, some maybe had cell phones and computers somewhere, but I didn't even see them. I think some people were in their room playing video games, but I didn't even know that. And it was very intentionally in order to cultivate community. We all lived at the school, and it was this really wonderful environment for that to experiment. I couldn't have done it in high school because, just like Skylar was talking about, I mean, if I didn't have social media, I would have not been able to have friends. I wouldn't have been able to communicate or find out about events or anything. And so, yeah, and one thing that, but I wasn't at the school this whole time. And one thing that really stood out was how not having the digital world as part of my options for what I could be doing at any given time meant I was very present, and yet other people around me often weren't. And I remember very clearly visiting my family and being very sad about leaving my friends, visiting my family, and having a month to spend with them, and having been very reluctant to do this in the first place, sitting there and being like, okay, here I am, here's my full attention, let's spend time together. And my family members always being on a phone and or computer while I'm spending time with them. And I was not doing that. So I didn't have that like half attention. I was just sitting there kind of, and they weren't really entirely there. And so I remember that being very striking. And also it really highlighted the way other things about how other people were part of this world. Sometimes people would give me directions when I was traveling. I didn't have a phone, so I didn't have a GPS. I had to ask directions and look at maps. And sometimes they would not only not know how to get to the place that they were in that neighborhood of, but they would look it up on Google and then give me the wrong directions to a place, even with Google. And then the next person would give me different directions, and eventually I would somehow figure it out. But yeah.
That's a very interesting perspective. Yeah, that's a cool story. Cool. Well, we're gonna kind of transition into almost the good side of social media. So I know that some of our panelists are interested in discussing the ways that we can prioritize digital wellness and try using social media in a healthy way. So there's kind of that bridge between fully logging off and deleting all the apps forever and being addicted to them, like kind of finding that middle ground. So this is also an audience member had a question about, and we're gonna have a Q&A after this section, but it's kind of addressing these similar issues. But just like if any of you have any personal experiences or tips with kind of decreasing this addiction, but also just prioritizing using it in a healthy way.
So from July to August, I was inpatient in the hospital doing a really intensive rehab, like pain rehab program for a chronic illness that I have. And I was kind of forced to not be online because I just didn't have time for it. And kind of going through that, I was like, if I'm going to be stuck in the hospital, I'm going to try to better myself through this. And the biggest way was kind of getting off social media. And things that I found was setting time limits on my social media apps, 30 minutes a day, that's all I get. And then I, go off of it. I would hide my like counts and turn off comments. I would unfollow someone who brought any negativity on something like TikTok. I would stick to my following page because I knew that I followed positive, funny people, and I, kind of stay off of the For You page that wasn't always as positive. And if something was happening that I was missing out on, that I was upset about, I would, delete that app for a night or two and just kind of log off of it and do my own thing, because it's hard to just completely delete it all. But if you can just do it for a night or two and kind of take a break, I think that those are some really good ways to kind of help with your mental health and help with some digital wellness and just kind of making it not such an important thing.
And I'd like to kind of piggyback off of what Skylar was talking about and say that all of that is exactly supported by research as well. And specifically with time limits, research has found that 10 minutes per platform per day and exceeding no more than 1 hour of social media in a day is like the sweet spot, because they've actually found that deleting all social media, while it can be good, can also have harmful effects on your social relationships, because your friends and family are all on those apps. And like I've even had experiences where I've like just like completely gone off TikTok, and my friends and family are like, oh, you don't know that trend, like you don't know that audio, like and like it feels kind of alienating to not be a part of something or be in the know on like a big piece of culture among our generation. And so finding that sweet spot for you of how much time is good to be spending on and how much time is just harmful, as well as like actively engaging in social media rather than being passive and just like scrolling through and like maybe leaving the occasional like. Research has found that like commenting and sharing and like really engaging with people in a positive and healthy way can be really beneficial for your digital well-being.
Awesome. I'm just going to jump in because I've also done a lot of those tips that you've given and like research stuff to kind of like change the way that you use the apps. And I'm curious, because I've found that when changing my relationship, it's helped a lot with kind of the mental aspect with my mental health, but also just being authentically connected to others. But I still don't feel that that's helped me that much with like the addiction front. I still feel like pretty much as addicted as I was before, even though it feels a little bit better. So I'm curious if any of you have experience with that or any tips to combat that specific addiction as well.
I feel like, oh, sorry. You can go.
The one thing that I started doing that helped me a lot was keeping my phone somewhere that I wasn't. And that's really hard at first because all you're going to be thinking about is, oh, like I want to check my phone. I want to check my notifications, who's texted me, who's called me. But I found that starting that at night was really helpful. And just at nighttime, I would go plug my phone in a different room or in a different area in my room, because then the last thing I was seeing at night wasn't me comparing myself to someone online, and it wasn't checking notifications. It was just having some downtime and starting by putting my phone somewhere I wasn't for like small amounts of time, not like crazy to start off with, but that was something that really helped me.
A couple things that I would say about that is, one, that I found it really helpful when I was returning from a long period of time off of these things. It gave me this, because I was no longer immediately in all of those habits and behaviors. They had kind of faded a bit. They're not totally gone. I'm sure that my mind was still impacted by them, but it gave me this opportunity to go, okay, what do I actually want to use this for? And to then specifically and selectively allow certain things back in, like, okay, here, I'm going to use email now. And then I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna look at this blog. And that for a long time, it was just like email this blog and typing stuff in word processors. And then that there was a point where because my school basically required me to have Facebook and required me to like use all of these platforms, and I was exhausted, and my barriers of self-control were lowered by coursework and stuff like that. That kind of fell apart a bit, but it was so helpful at first. And if I hadn't had all those pressures, it would have been so helpful just to be able to selectively allow certain habits back. And I also think one thing is that we're mostly talking about what an individual person can do, but I think where the real solutions to this are going to come from is groups of people getting together and making agreements collectively. And I'm really actually trying to work on developing a school program that helps facilitate this, because you're always going to have your choices worn down by people around you, as both Olivia and Skylar were just describing, and I was describing. And but if we can say, okay, well, as a school community or as a neighborhood or whatever your social group is, what do we want? Where are we seeing harms? And like, where do we want to draw lines and limits and like facilitate other things? Because I think another thing that's like not always in the discussion is that it's not just about how are we using social media, it's about like, let's do other stuff. What are the other things we can get hooked on and excited about that are healthy and meaningful and wonderful outside of this? Because those things will pull you away from like habitually scrolling and stuff like that. So those are some thoughts.
Great points, guys. Yeah, I really appreciate that. Cool. So this is kind of my last question. I would love to hear from each of you on this actually. It's kind of just a very overarching question because I know we all have pretty different backgrounds, but I'm curious, do you think the benefits outweigh the cons? And if so, how much? Like what's that ratio like in your opinion for social media versus for using it versus staying off of it?
I believe that for me personally, and hopefully others, I think that the pros of social media outweigh the cons. I think that there is definitely negativity and there is definitely issues that come along with social media, but you think about how much good has come from it and how much we've learned about others and we've learned about the world and how we can make friendships and connections with people. And you can find friends on there. I know when you're like, don't talk to strangers online, but I think there's so many ways to make friends now, especially, in safe ways, obviously. And I think with COVID, like that's kind of what we were forced to do was like, okay, go online and make friends because you can't go out and see people anymore. And I think that kind of became a positive thing. And if you can find the ways that are good for yourself to make social media a positive thing, then I just think it's helpful. And I think can be very positive.
I would definitely agree. I do think that the benefits outweigh the harms because I think with a lot of effort, the harms can be addressed. But there are so many ways that social media and technology has just become an integral part of our lives. Like how Skylar was saying, like it keeps everyone connected. Like I have friends that are all over the world, and without social media, I wouldn't be able to communicate with them. Like I went to college in Colorado, but I'm from Minnesota and I have friends abroad. And, I live on the East Coast now. And without, social media, it would be so much harder to stay connected with all of them. And, I'm a big user of Snapchat because I love to see my friends' faces. And, without that, like, going back to like just like texting or whatever, it feels really different. As well as like educating myself about like all of these different like social causes that are going on around the world, like Black Lives Matter, and like the whole like all of these movements that are happening. It, like would be so hard to connect with people and educate myself without hearing these people's experiences or like knowing what's going on in a different part of the country or the world.
So I would say I definitely lean more towards the cons of social media, and not to dismiss the pros that it has. But since I haven't been on it for almost 4 years now, I have learned how to still connect and how to be social without it. And it's actually not hard. I mean, there's still text message, phone call, FaceTime, and email is a great way it's a great gateway into getting to know people. I've moved around a few different states in the country, and I have had no problem keeping in touch with family members or friends that live on the other side of the country. And we can talk anytime. And, they don't know what I'm doing until they reach out or I reach out, and then we all catch up, and it's usually on a call, and it's, we're talking back and forth, and it's a great conversation. And I'm totally able to stay connected with my whole social group without any social media. and, just going out and talking to people, if you want to walk around your school, and it's not as common these days, but, if you're in the library or, just walking around the common area and you just bump into people and just say, hey, what's up? Another great way to just meet new people. So, I don't want to dismiss any good things that social media does bring, because I know it does bring them. But I've had no problem being connected without it. So I figured I would share that.
I'd say this is a really hard question to answer because there's so many dimensions. There's that whole political, social, big picture dimension. I think personally for me, I would love to be in a place again where I pretty much have very little computer use in my life, especially social media. But whether it has like the pros and the cons and the big picture, I mean, one thing that I wonder, and I don't have an answer for, is people see social media as empowering individuals to have more of an impact in the world and create these movements and things. And I really wonder if it is empowering individuals, because I sometimes feel like as it currently is, what it's doing is giving everyone this hope that they can go viral, that they can like be the next influencer or create a like huge movement, but that it's not actually like causing more people to have that role than like pre-social media celebrities or whatever. I suspect that like, because everything gets selected for so heavily and it's this global thing, it's probably just as hard. You just feel like it's more possible and there's more people competing to do those things as well. But I don't know, like, does it have a positive impact on social issues? Maybe. Does it yeah, it's so value dependent. Like I value things that are really destroyed by social media, and so I'm biased in that way, but then there's things that other people value that social media enables that maybe couldn't exist otherwise. So yeah.
Thank you all so much for your valuable insights. It's so awesome to hear all your perspectives and various points on these topics. So now we're about to wrap things up, but we're gonna open it up to the audience for a Q&A. Unfortunately, we only have about 5 minutes, but I would love to hear if anyone has any questions in the audience. I know that I'll wait for those to filter in, but while we do that, we can try to quickly kind of answer one that we received earlier from the audience. So Seth kind of mentioned something about the pandemic, but I'm curious, in your personal experience, all of you, what maybe how that all of these issues have been kind of impacted through the pandemic and how it shifted our usage of social media.
Yeah, I mean, I'm in high school, so I was kind of one of the ones we were all just thrown into it. And it didn't matter if you liked being online or not, that's what you had to do. Like, you're on online school now, have fun. And we didn't have the option of going to school and talking to people. Like I said earlier, like social media, that was how we were connected, and that's it. And I think that was hard. It was really hard not seeing people. But if we didn't have social media and we were trying to go through that, I could not even imagine, because you're already so alone. Seeing people's faces, even if it was just on Instagram or Snapchat, that made us all feel way less alone, because what else were we going to do? Like, we had to rely on FaceTime and TikTok and Instagram. And I think that those all were really helpful apps during the pandemic and while we were all doing online school. And yes, it was hard. And I remember I started off the year, I'd get up out of bed every day, get dressed, go sit on the computer. And then by the end, I was just laying in my bed with my camera off, having the teacher talking, and I was procrastinating. I wasn't getting work done. But I think that having social media during that made it a little better, and it made it better to find the motivation for me to get up.
This is really interesting to talk about, because like social media, as Skylar was saying, is like, it really helped us in a lot of ways and kept us connected when we literally could not leave our houses to see each other. And like without it, like connecting with people would have been hard, and like finding that social support. There was actually some research that was done on the impact of meme pages during COVID and what a positive effect meme pages had on people's well-being, which is awesome and amazing. But then on the flip side, you know, we have a lot more people scrolling, and like I even found myself just in this mindless scroll of, well, there's nothing else to do, so I'm just going to sit there and scroll through all of my feeds and, you know, be like, oh, poor me, you know, and like spent so much time just sitting and not, you know, like finding all these new hobbies to do. And I think that was pretty common for a lot of people, particularly in our generation. And even seeing with my parents, like they were constantly going online, and, you know, with all of with Facebook and a lot of people sharing their own opinions also on COVID, there was a lot of spread of helpful information and also misinformation, which is important to acknowledge as well. And so I think, you know, social media had a lot of really great benefits, but there were also a lot of harms. And being kept online like almost all day with school was a whole other challenging factor in itself, that created a lot of problems of just physically a lot of problems, even of just sitting and staring at the screen. And I know that was pretty common for a lot of people.
Definitely. I think this is a great endpoint because unfortunately we have to wrap up. But thank you everyone so much for joining us tonight. This was such an amazing, engaging conversation about some difficult issues. But Tyler, Seth, Olivia, and Skylar, great job. And thank you so much for sharing your unique perspectives. It was so cool to hear from all of you. Everyone have a great rest of your weekend. I appreciate it. See ya.
Thanks, Maddie.